I would like to state that I pray for the grace of God on our soldiers, on the souls of our soldiers who lost their lives in Idlib due to the heinous attack they were exposed to. And in the same attack, 12 soldiers were injured, and a civilian translator was injured as well, and I wish them a quick recovery. On this occasion, I would like to talk about our strategy for the forthcoming periods and make a comprehensive evaluation about the situation. My distinguished brothers and sisters, the presence of Turkey in Syria is not an arbitrary choice or not an event that came about out of nothing. To stay away from the conflicts in Syria that took start in 2012, we showed patience for years to protect their homeland, to protect their beloved ones, their lives. We continued to support our Syrian brothers and sisters from the other side of the border in our country. And for a million Syrian refugees who fled from the oppression of the regime, we welcomed them and did not hesitate to open our doors to them. Throughout the history, our nation has always stood with the oppressed, and we have never turned away from them, and we will not. But from 2015 on, the crisis in Syria has gone out of control completely. The regime and the terrorist organizations started harassing our borders and then threatened the life of our citizens and our security. And it has come to such a dire point. A provocation in which FETÖ was also involved. The aircraft crisis made the Syrian issue much more complicated for us. And of course, in such a situation, we were not going to keep our hands tied. With the Syrian government, we signed a memorandum, Adana agreement in 1998. And if necessary, this agreement gives us the right to launch operations in the Syrian border, and we know that this operation will outreach to all the locations where the terrorists are. And in this regard, in 2016 August, Daesh, PKK, and YPG, targeting those terrorist organizations, we initiated our Euphrates Shield operation. And during that operation, we neutralized more than 3,000 Daesh members and cleared Jarablus and Elbab regions from the terrorists, as known. Some say, what do you have to do in the Syrian territories? Did Syria invite you over? They invited the others, some say, but they did not invite the USA or the coalition powers. They only did ask Russia to step in, but we have the Adana agreement, a solid agreement, and due to and pertaining to that agreement, we are in Syria. The Euphrates Shield operation was launched against Daesh, and it was the only serious and outcome-providing operation. All the powers in Syria, using Daesh as an excuse for themselves, apply their own agendas, but Turkey broke the backbone of that terrorist organization and exposed them. When Turkey was engaged in struggling against Daesh, the Syrian regime was engaged in activities to take over Aleppo. Due to the lack of concrete outcomes from the Geneva process, Turkey and Russia in 2017 started the Astana talks. Following the comprehensive talks in Astana, Idlib, Humus, Hama, Laskiye, Dara, and East Ghouta regions were declared to be demilitarized zones. But did they abide by that agreement? No, the regime did not abide by that agreement, and they did destroy, burn all the no-conflict zones, and they did shed blood. And this violence, to that violence, many did only remain as bystanders. And PKK, YPG, and PYD used the Afrin region to attack our country, and that is why we turned our faces towards Afrin. And with the Operation Olive Branch, we cleared the area from the terrorists and brought about peace and stability to the region. The number of the terrorists neutralized during the Operation Olive Branch stands at a figure of some 4,500. And with Russia in 2018, we made a decision to create a de-escalation zone within the framework of Sochi Agreement, and that is why we established 12 observation posts. I would like to underline, reiterate once again, all these processes were run with Russia, with the USA, through the contacts we established at the highest levels, and we were only engaged in cooperation and did run all those processes in line with agreements. And from the east of the Euphrates all the way down to the Iraqi border, across our southern border, however, the efforts to create a terrorist corridor did not come to an end. The purpose was to divide Syria using another terrorist organization through another terrorist organization. Indeed, the matter for them was about the oil reserves, or the reserves in the area, and it was obvious who grown an appetite for it. And in 2019, we came in terms with the USA, and we initiated the Operation Peace Spring. And through that operation, an area with the length of 145 kilometers and 30 to 40 kilometers in depth was cleared from the terrorists, and also for the locations that fall onto the left and the right of the operation zone. We ensured a secure zone with cooperation with Syria, in cooperation with Syria. And at this current point, in Idlib or in other safe zone, we see that the agreements signed are not put in action, are not being materialized, including Sochi Agreement, even though we reiterated many times that we have sensitivity for those agreements. The agreements are not followed. The attack that was launched against our soldiers the other day in Idlib is the milestone of new relations, because this was an attack intentionally made against our soldiers. When the Turkish soldiers' blood is shed, we cannot let things unfold as they are right now.
Nitekim anında yaptığımız operasyonlarla
Consequently, through the operations we launched immediately, we neutralized some 76 people. And if one party is not going to abide by the agreements, then why do we sign those agreements? Without Russia in the air, without Iran on the land, over the land, we know that the regime does not have the power even to move a grain of sand. And with the support of the USA and with Russia showing tolerance, the regime can only act. And the regime now that acts like a lion against Turkey will not be able to get any advantage. And we know the reasons for it. The puppet that is called the regime is not recognized anywhere in the world, but do some think that they are only alive through the life support devices, if you will, connected to them, and do some think that we are not aware of the intentionally done things. We know all of these realities and even more, but we are different than the others that stand against us. Turkey will never be engaged in activities that will hurt someone or damage someone's properties. This is the principle on which we base our activities.
Aksi takdirde zalimlerden bir farkımız kalmaz.
Otherwise, we will not be different than the oppressors.
Medeniyetimizin ve kültürümüzün bize gösterdiği
What our culture and civilization shows us is to crush the head of the oppressors and stand with the oppressed. And that is how we host around 3.7 million refugees, and at the expense of our lives, we defend our brothers and sisters in Syria, and we share the pain of every one out there, and feel the sorrow for everyone who passes away. And we will be protecting the rights of life for the oppressed, and we, by way of destroying the oppressors, take all these risks. And while, of course, being engaged in all these activities, we do think about the existence, the safety of our country. We know that those external parties are related with one another, and we very much know that one of them cannot act alone without the help of the other. If someone asks what Turkey does in Syria, you should be assured that they are either against our country or they do not know much. The same situation applies for the whole North African region, Caucasia, the Mediterranean, and most importantly, Libya. And that is why, with all the power we have, with the means at hand, and with the determination we have, we will continue to work for the peace and stability of the region. Distinguished friends, the developments unfolding in Syria affect us in Idlib and also in terms of our security strategy alongside our borders. And it made us make changes. The number of people that started moving towards our borders has come to a figure of almost 1 million, and no one has the right to put that kind of a load on our shoulder. And we have to fix that situation, and we are determined to ensure that the people of Idlib live in their homes. And we will not allow any step that is against the agreements we have or that are like the violations of the agreements. And we last night with Mr. Putin had a phone conversation, and I expressed my concerns about the observation posts. 2 of those 12 observation posts are are behind the regime-controlled areas, and if the regime does not retreat throughout this period, Turkey will be in the need of carrying that out on her own. And the ceasefire violations all the way from the beginning, of course, have not been single-sided, and the violations of the regime in terms of the ceasefire is numerous. Certain groups across the country are brought and into Idlib, and everyone knew that this was not going to work out as such, and Turkey's determination and ambition is very much obvious to see. The attacks that targeted civilians, of course, have always been retaliated, and the violations of the regime will be in line with the principle of reciprocity, be of course retaliated through military operations. Any kind of air or overland strike will be, of course, retaliated, no matter what the purpose or intention is. And if our soldiers are not protected in Idlib, then we will be claiming our right to be engaged in carrying out those activities ourselves, and no one can object to that. For that, the Turkish armed forces will be using the air and land elements whenever necessary, and they will be acting freely in Idlib and in the operation zones, and if need be, they will be launching operations. In the region of the Euphrates Shield, the Tel Rifat region stands out like a tumor, and this area will be and should be cleared from the terrorists and given back to the real owners of that area. And for the peace to prevail in the region, this problem has to be solved. And on the other hand, in the area of the Operation Peace Spring, from Jarablus to Tel Abyad and down to the Iraqi border, this area is still under the control of the terrorist organization, and it is no good for anyone to deny that obvious reality. And the area in between Tel Abyad and Resulayn is under continuous attack by the regime. And in line with the agreements we have, Turkey has the condition for everyone to pay attention to in terms of ensuring peace and stability. But the bombs, the attacks show that these conditions are not met. And if the attackers of those terrorist organizations are not being stopped, then it will be inevitable for us to be personally engaged in launching such activities to stop them. In the forthcoming days, we expect steps to be taken within this framework. Otherwise, the operation we started in the Operation Peace Spring will continue on the left and the right locations of the zone. In Idlib and also in the other operation zones, this will be the new path that Turkey will pursue. We do not have any issue with our allies, with our partners, or with any country. We do not have such an intention. We do not have such a matter in mind. The only purpose that we have is to end the crisis in Syria and bring about stability for the country. And until then, we will be engaged in any activity to find the sustainable solutions, the solutions that are the safest and the best. And we, I would like to underline, will not forget any support to be lent to us throughout that period. And we attach great importance to our friendship and alliance and cooperation with Russia, from tourism to energy, from trade to defense. We have strong relations with Syria, and our only expectation from Russia is for them to understand our sensitivities in Syria much better. And the talks we have had with Mr. Putin over the phone or face to face ensure that our relations stand on solid grounds. And last night we had a comprehensive, detailed phone conversation, and I personally expressed our expectations regarding Syria to him, and our teams will be addressing these issues in detail. After that, we will meet again, and we will continue to follow every step regarding the promises delivered. Likewise, we made a contact with the Chancellor Merkel and talked about what kind of steps we have to take forward regarding Syria. Distinguished friends, we can clearly see that some are being disturbed by our presence in Syria. When you have a look to see who are in Syria, the picture is obvious to see. In Syria, the USA, Iran, and also some European countries under the title of coalition powers are present. And in Syria, we see some Gulf countries. And in Syria, PKK terrorist organization is active. And in Syria, we see some remnants of Daesh. And I can say, finally, everyone is in Syria. And of course, Turkey is in Syria as well.
Eyvallah. Buna karşılık Suriye'de
Thank
sadece
you. In
Türkiye'nin varlığından
Syria,
rahatsızlık duyuluyor.
there are some who are being disturbed by the presence of Turkey in Syria, but they do not talk about the others. Why so?
Bugüne gelmesinde
And the ones who are being the most disturbed are those who had a lot of share in what is ongoing in Syria currently. And all these Syrian people, do they go to those countries we talk about? These Syrians come to our country. About 4 million of them live in our country, and we host them. And now we are constructing houses. We created a safe zone about 30 kilometers in depth down from our border, and we are now constructing houses to house the Syrians coming from Idlib, and we are engaged in intensive work to make sure of that. So we are troubled by that, but are the other parties troubled seeing such people suffering that much? Their only concern is to arm PYD, YPG, or PKK more and more. They want to arm them much more so that they could stand against Turkey in that region. And who's their enemy? Turkey is an enemy to them, and they know that Turkey will not allow them to stay as an invading power or invading powers, and the regime knows that very clearly. And I know the attitudes of the regime as regards the ethnicity of the people living there, and they do not like the people from different ethnicities. They, for example, this Assad used to not even grant passports, issue passports to the people of Kurdish origin. Assad is the same person. Nothing has changed. And right now, in the Syrian territories, these people are active. And I believe in the forthcoming periods, the regime will not give them the right to live. And we, on the other hand, have no concern as such. Our territories are enough for us, and we are happy, alhamdulillah, in our motherland, and we live happily and in a humane way. But our concern is to keep our unity, our alliance, our unison with Syria, a country with which we have had relations for years throughout the history, and our purpose is to block away the invaders who are willing to step in to the region. When you go to the region, you will see that we have had the national pact there, and Mr. Kemal says what Turkey does in the region, but Mr. Kemal, you should first see whose signature is on the documents of the national pact. And Mr. Kemal always says CHP is the political party of Atatürk, but you, Mr. Kemal, are not aware whose party it is, indeed, because in Syria everyone is there, not only a regime that represents a certain portion of the society. We have had close relations with the Syrians throughout the history, and Turkey is the country that can claim the right to be in Syria the most, and it goes the same for us considering the Adana agreement. The area that is controlled by Turkey in Syria is only of 8,200 square kilometers. But the purpose here is not to allow the terrorist organization to be active in an area of 50,000 square kilometers. And nobody thinks about that. We talk about a regime that fights with its own people and that massacres, slaughters its own people. And the fact that they do so does not disturb anyone. And there are some people who have not had a single relation with the Syrian people, and they are engaged in activities. But I would like to reiterate, Turkey has no intention to stay in the Syrian territories forever. And as long as a new constitution is created, and as soon as a regime that cares for the safety and the liberty of its people, and as soon as the invading powers leave the Syrian territories, then Turkey will not have anything else to do there. And until that day, no one can question what Turkey does in Syria, and they do not have the capacity to do so. The territorial integrity, the political unity of Syria, the sooner that these are achieved, the better it will be for us. And Turkey will continue to work in that area, exert efforts, and encourage all the relevant parties. And we expect the same common sense from the other parties. Distinguished friends, another matter we closely follow with sensitivity is Palestine and Jerusalem. As during our presidency of the OIC, we showed attitudes, portrayed attitudes that were appreciated by the Islam world, and we stood for the Palestinian cause and owned up to the case. With the support of 128 countries, the decision of the U.S. to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel was rejected. And this determined stance we have had throughout that whole process has not been only towards a certain reason. But we did not only support the rights of the Muslim there, we also supported and stood for the rights of many Christians. And we know that we are the grandchildren of an ancestry that served to the lens of Jerusalem for 4 centuries consecutively, and any other attitude would not have become us. And we did what our fate, what our history demanded us to do, and we will continue to do so. The American administration shared a plan regarding the annexation of Jerusalem. As I said before, this is not a plan for peace. This is a plan for annexation and occupation. And the sole purpose of this plan is to further ignite the oppressions, the invasion of Israel that has been ongoing for 70 years, and it is to give further legitimacy to what they do. My dear brothers and sisters, if you look at that screen over there, you will see that the territories of Palestine in 1947, you can see how it was back then and what it is now. Before 1947, you see what the map looks like.
Arkadaşlar görüyorsunuz değil mi? Bakınız.
You can see it,
1947'de
can't you? In 1947, 1947.
Harita
You can see
böyle.
this was
Filistin topraklarının durumu
the
böyle.
this was how the Palestinian territories looked.
Değerli arkadaşlar, harita bu.
My distinguished friends,
Filistin
this is the
toprakları
map,
gördüğünüz gibi
the Palestinian territory.
şu anda yapılmak
It
istenen
was like that.
Filistin
And what are they now
bu
trying to
halini
do?
şimdi
They want to
İsrail toprakları haline
turn
getirmek
the
istiyorlar.
old version of the Palestinian territories.
Arkadaşlar bunu en sona bırakın. Acele etmeyin. Acele etmeyin. Önce şu haritayı bir
Do not hurry up,
ezberleyelim.
my dear friends.
Hep
Let
birlikte
us
ezberletelim.
see that
Televizyonlarda bizi izleyenler bunu
map
ezberlesin.
clearly and memorize how it was. And those watching us on TV
Ve
should also memorize what the map
şu anda
looked like
yapmak
in the
istedikleri
past. So what they are trying to
bu hale
do
getirmek.
right now is
Ne yazık
to
ki
make Israel
Filistin'i de
look like what
işte
Palestine
İsrail'in
was
o
in the
zamanki
past
haline
and
dönüşüyor.
turn
Ve
it the other way
şu
around.
anda Filistin için
And right
düşünülen
now, what they
bu.
think and plan for Palestine is exactly
en son
that
bana
map,
doğru olan
the map that is
haritayı
to
şimdi Filistin için düşünüyor.
my left. And now they think
Böyle bir
that
vicdansızlık var.
Palestine will have that much
Vicdani
to
olmayan,
take. This
insani
is
olmayan
not
bir
humane.
adım atıldı.
This is not an act of conscience. They are
şimdi
taking steps
Tabii
forward
bu
for that
Birleşmiş
end.
Milletler'e de
And of course, this
gelecek
is going to be
Birleşmiş
brought
Milletler'de de
to
bunun
the attention
tartışmalarını
of the
yapacağız.
UN,
Ayrı
and
mesele.
at the UN meetings,
Fakat
we will be discussing that.
kendileri
It
de
is a
biraz sonra
different
göreceksiniz.
subject of discussion,
Zaten birbirlerine düştüler.
but you will see now they are engaged
Bakıyorsunuz,
in fights with one
birisi
another.
el sıkmıyor veya o onun elini
Some is
sıkıyor.
not shaking the
Ondan
hand of
sonra
the other,
verilen konuşma
and
metnini Pelosi
you see the
bütün milletin huzurunda orada yırtıyor atıyor.
speech text, and Pelosi is tearing down the whole document in
Allah
front of
mazlumun ahını
everyone. And
çıkara
it
hesap.
is as such.
Şimdi değerli arkadaşlar,
And you should always care
1947'ye
for
geliyoruz.
the
bakınız
oppressed, otherwise
1947'de
you
de
will suffer the
Birleşmiş
consequences.
Milletler'in Taksim planı.
And here we in 1947 see the plan of
Kudüs,
the
Gazze,
UN.
yeşil
Here
olanlar,
Jerusalem and Gaza
kırmızı
are
olanlar
marked
da
in green,
ne yapalım?
and the red
Birleşmiş
areas
Milletler'in yaptığı Taksim
are the ones
İsrail oraları ver.
given to Israel
Geliyoruz 67'ye.
according to the UN
67'de
plan, unfortunately.
Filistin
And
çok
now
daha
we come
küçülüyor.
to 1967,
yine
and you see
yeşil
the
olan
territories
kısım
of Palestine did
Filistin
shrink even further,
ve
and the green areas
ufacık da bir yer
on that map
Gazze.
is only
Geliyoruz. Şimdi
the
düşünülene,
Palestinian territory
işte bunun
and
adı
the other
sözde barış planı.
Israeli. And now the
Yani
current
işgal
picture,
planı.
they call it
Bu işgal
the peace
planında
plan.
da
It is a would-be
görüldüğü gibi
peace plan,
adeta
but it is, on the
Filistin
contrary,
hiç
a
yok.
plan of occupation and invasion. And in this
Küçük noktalar
plan,
itibariyle
as you can
Gazze
see on the map, Palestine
dışındaki bütün her
does not
yer
almost
şimdi
exist. There are
sözde
only some small spots given
böyle bir
to
noktaya
Palestine, and the rest is given to
İsrail
Israel.
yönetimini
This is
şimdi
how it looks now.
geçebiliriz.
And the Israeli administration.
Trump'ın
Okay, now let's
konuşmasına.
go to the other
Under this vision,
slide,
Jerusalem
Trump's
will
speech.
remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided, very important, undivided capital.
Yüzyılın anlaşması. Ne anlaşması ya? Bu bir işgal projesidir.
Kudüs kırmızı çizgimiz.
Jerusalem is our red line. Jerusalem is our red line.
Devam edelim, bitmedi ki.
Let's continue.
Under this vision, Jerusalem will remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided capital.
Yüzyılın anlaşması. Ne anlaşması ya? Bu bir işgal projesidir.
Kudüs kırmızı çizgimiz. Bu kadar değil canım. Şimdi buradan soruyorum.
So now,
Akıl,
I would like to ask
vicdan ve ahlak sahibi hangi
those
kimse
who have
bu
conscience,
vahşete rıza gösterebilir? Tam 70 yıldır
a clear
evlerinde
mind,
kavuşma hasretiyle bekleyen
can they
Filistinli mültecilerin
tolerate
geri
that?
dönüş hakkının
And they also
olmayacağını
claim
söylüyor.
that the Palestinians living abroad will not
Kendi
have a
topraklarına
right
dönemeyecek.
to be repatriated. They will
Ürdün'de
not
ise
be
o kadar.
allowed to be
Lübnan'da ise Lübnan'da kalacak.
repatriated.
Yer yerlerde,
So
neredeyse orada
they won't
kalacak.
let
Yani
them
kendi topraklarına bir
back
daha
in their
dönemeyecek.
own
Bunlar
motherlands.
birer
If they're
şagir.
in
Bunlar işgalci.
Lebanon, then they will
Demek ki
have to live in
Trump bu
Lebanon or in
işgalcilerin
some other
arkasında
countries,
duruyor.
they say. So these people are
Kudüs'ün ve
actually
Filistin'in
the
gözlere göre
oppressors. These
İsrail'le
are
peşkeş
the
çekilmesini
occupiers.
kim içine
And
sindirebilir?
how can
Bırakın
somebody
Müslümanları,
tolerate
böylesi bir işgal
the
planının Hristiyanlar
annexation
Gazze'nin
of
sahibi
Palestine
Museviler
as
için
such, and such a plan, even for the Jews, cannot be accepted. And the Orthodox Jewish people, as you know, burned themselves in front of their cars, and they showed how courageous they were. And I visited the
Niye?
community leader, the rabbi himself,
Bizde nefret
and
yok.
his
Ama
delegation
bunların her
5
yerinden
days
nefret
after
akıyor,
that
kin
plan
akıyor.
was declared. So we do not have any grudge, we do not have any
Ya
hatred
bunların
against
eli
anyone, but they
savunmasız
are
kadınlara
spilling out
kalkıyor.
of hatred, and
O
they only
sabilere, çocuklara
target
kalkıyor.
those undefended, the
Yerlerde
children,
süründürüyorlar.
young babies,
Bunları ekranlarda
and
hep
women.
birlikte
They
zaten izledik, izliyoruz.
drag them on
Bunlar bu
the
devri
ground. We
insanlıktan
watched all of
nasibini
these
almamış
on
olan
the
tipler.
screens, and these are the people who
Türkiye olarak
have not
Filistin'i işgal,
had any
Kudüs'ü
share
gasp etme anlamına
of
gelecek bu planı
humanity.
hemen reddettik.
And
Tepkimizi
we,
açıkça
that is
ortaya
why,
koyduk.
rejected
Ardından
that
Filistin Devlet
plan
Başkanı Sayın
immediately
Mahmut
after
Abbas ile
its
telefonda
declaration, and
Hamas
stood on
lideri
solid
İsmail
grounds,
Haniye ile
and with
İstanbul'da
Hamas
yüz yüze görüşerek
immediately,
Filistinli
and
kardeşlerimizin yanında olduğumuzu gösterdik.
we
Türkiye'nin
talked
güçlü
face to
tepkisini
face and
plana destek
showed that
açıklaması yapan
Turkey
kimi Arap
always
ülkelerinde tavır
will
değişikliğine
always
zorladığını
stand
görüyoruz.
with them, and the Turkey's attitude
şu
we can
anda
see has changed
maalesef
the
Amerika
attitudes of some
gerek
Gulf
şahsıma,
countries.
gerek
Gulf
istihbarat
countries,
başkanıma yönelik
and
tehditler saldırıyor.
now the USA is
Ve
now
daha da ileri
posing some threats
Türkiye'deki
against
bazı
me
finans
personally
kuruluşlarında
and to
tehdit altına
the
alıyor.
leader, the chief of the intelligence agency, and they
Ne
are
yaparsanız yapın.
also posing threats,
kesinlikle
threatening
başaramaz.
some Turkish companies and whatsoever. But no matter what you do, you will
Ve
not be able to
Filistin'de
pull this
o
off.
kadınların
And
direnişi
in
karşısında
Palestine, many
bize
women
düşen
do resist, and when
onların
we
en
see
az
how
onların
they
direnişi
resist,
kadar dik
what is
durmaktır. Bunu
our
başarmamız
share
lazım.
is to stand at least as tall as how they stand,
Çok büyük
and
paraları
share their
olabilir.
resistance. They might
Çok büyük
have a
silahları
lot of
olabilir.
money, they might possess
başlıklı
lots of
silahları da olabilir.
weapons or nuclear warheads, but we do know very clearly that
Nice az inanmış toplulukları inanmamış kalabalıkların üzerine galip kıldık diyor bizim
that
kutsal
those who have faith and are small in number will become
Dolayısıyla
victorious
planla ilgili ikircikli
against
ifadeler
those
kullanan kimi
who are
devletlerde
numerous but
kamuoylarından
who
gelen
lack
tepkiler
faith.
karşısında
And some
farklı bir
other
tutum almaya başladı.
countries
Arap Birliği'nin ve
following
İslam
the
İşbirliği
reactions
Teşkilatı'nın
coming from
geçtiğimiz günlerde aldığı
across the
kararları
world
bu noktada
started
olumlu
changing
karşılıyor,
their behaviors.
destekliyoruz.
And we
Çıkarları veya korkuları yüzünden
know that
Kudüs'ü
there
gasp
are
etme
some
girişimlerine
who try to
sessiz
usurp
kalanları ise
Palestine due
tarih
to their
asla affetmeyecek.
interests, and those
Gün
who keep a blind
sessizliğe
eye
bürünme değil,
to the situation in
Filistin
Palestine
davasına
will
ve
not be
Kudüs-ü
forgiven
Şerif'e sahip
in
çıkma
history.
günü.
And it is the time, it is about time for us all to own up to
Buradan bir
what
kez daha şu
Palestine
gerçeğin
goes
herkes tarafından
through and
bilinmesini
stand with them. I
Kudüs
would like to
davası
once again
tüm Müslümanların
highlight one
davasıdır,
reality. The Palestinian
onurudur,
cause is the cause for
namusudur.
all the Muslims.
Kudüs
And it
aynı
is our
zamanda
honor, it is
üç semavi
our
dininde
dignity. And Jerusalem
mukaddes
is the
beldesi.
holy land for
Kudüs'ün
three
nevi şahsına
religions.
münhasır bu
And
özelliklerini
Jerusalem
dikkate almayan hiçbir
is
girişimin
has
hangi ambalajla pazarlanırsa pazarlansın başarı
a
şansı yok.
generous
Filistin'in
position,
ve
and
Filistinli
it is
kardeşlerimizin
not possible
meşru
for
haklarını
some to
ellerinden
market
almaya
Jerusalem
yönelik
as
teşebbüslerin
such.
tamamı
And all the
hezimete
activities
uğramaya
that try,
mahkum.
that attempt to
Bölgemizde ve
usurp
Kudüs'te barış
the
ancak her
rights
kesimden,
of the
her
Palestinian
milletten,
brothers and
her
sisters
inançtan
will
ahlaklı,
be
dürüst
to no
ve
avail.
adil insanların
And
çabasıyla sağlanacak.
the stability and
Filistinli
peace in
kardeşlerimizin razı olmadığı
Palestine
bir
will be
plana
only possible
asla destek vermeyecek.
through honest behaviors to be portrayed by everyone, and we
Bugüne
will
kadar olduğu
never
gibi
support a
bundan sonra
plan
da
that does
zulme
not
rıza
respect the
göstermeyecek,
rights of our Palestinian brothers and sisters, and we will not
başkenti
show any
Doğu Kudüs
consent
olan
to
egemen,
repression, to
bitişik
oppression,
ve bağımsız
and
bir Filistin devletini
we
savunmayı
will continue
sürdüreceğiz.
to support a
kardeşlerim,
Palestinian state which
Türkiye'de
is sovereign,
milli iradeye
which is
ve
not
milli iradenin
divided, which
tecelligahı
is united.
olan Türkiye Büyük
And
Millet Meclisi
at the Turkish
sürekli
Grand National Assembly,
tuzak
the
kuran,
manifestation of
sürekli
our
büyüyecek kurumu
independence,
yıpratmaya çalışan
there,
bir zihniyet.
there is this mentality that
Zahirde
sets
demokrat
traps
gözüken
and
ama aslında
tries
faşistin
to
önde
weaken
gideni olan
us all the
bu
time.
Jacoben zihniyetin
That
yeni bir
Jacobanic
oyunuyla
mentality
karşı
now have
karşıyayız.
new games
Türkiye'nin AK
against
Parti
us.
döneminde yaşadığı
The
demokratikleşme
democratization
hamlelerinden biri de
process
suça
that
karışmış
Turkey
asker
has
kişilerin
been going
sivil
through
mahkemelerde
during the
yargılanabilmelerinin
AK
önünün
Party period
açılmasıdır.
is now
Türkiye
being
Büyük Millet Meclisi bu
targeted.
önemli
The
düzenlemeyi
Turkish Grand National
25
Assembly
Haziran
will
2009 tarihinde grubu bulunan
in
4 partinin
2009 with
ittifakıyla
the alliance of the four parties in the
Bu
group
partilerden
made
biri de Kemal
regulations, and
Kılıçdaroğlu'nun
one
grup
of
başkan
that
vekilliğini
those
yürüttüğü CHP.
parties is the CHP,
Malum
led by
durmuş
Mr.
saat
Kemal
bile günde 2
Kılıçdaroğlu.
defa
As you know,
doğruyu
even a broken
gösterebilir.
clock can show the time accurately twice a day.
O dönem CHP
But
her nasıl
during that
olmuşsa
time,
bu konuda
CHP
doğru bir tutum
somehow
sergilemiştir.
showed the right
Hatta bu
attitude
düzenlemeyle ilgili
about this
AK Parti
regulation,
grup başkan
and
vekilleriyle
with
görüşmeye
the
gelenlerden
deputy
biri de
chairpersons
Kılıçdaroğlu.
of AK Party, Mr.
Sonuçta
Kılıçdaroğlu,
meclis tarihinde
met,
ender
and
rastlanan
this
bir
was a
uzlaşmayla
rare
bu
reconciliation
düzenleme
seen
komisyondan ve
throughout
genel
our
kuruldan
history
geçip
of Grand National
kanunlaşmıştır.
Assembly, and this was how the motion was passed at the Assembly, and it was put in effect. And Mr. Erkash, you know
Düzenlemenin
well,
amacı
the purpose of the
darbelere
regulation
zemin hazırlayan,
was to
hukukun işlemesinin önüne
prevent
geçen,
those
ülkemizi
who
uluslararası
wanted
platformlarda
to
sürekli eleştiri konusu yapan yanlış bir
lay the
uygulamanın
grounds for
düzeltilmesi.
potential
Suç
military
işleyen kişinin
coups,
asker
and
kimliğinin ona
anyone
ayrıcalık
engaged
tanımasının
in a
ne
criminal act
hukukta ne
cannot
demokraside yeri
be
zaten olamaz.
be
Dönemin meclis
shown
tutanaklarına,
positive
komisyon ve genel
discrimination,
kurul
no matter if they
görüntülerine,
have a
gazete
uniform of the
haberlerine
military
verilen demeçlere
to wear. And
baktığımızda
when you look at
CHP'liler başta
what
olmak üzere
it
tüm meclisin bu
was like,
düzenlemeyi desteklediğini görüyoruz.
we know that the whole
Bugün de geriye dönüp
assembly
baktığımızda
supported that
meclisimizin
motion,
gayet
and
doğru bir iş yaptığını
our
düşünüyorum.
assembly, when
Bilindiği
we
gibi
look
15
back,
Temmuz'un
can
ardından
say did a
askeri
very
mahkemeleri
right thing.
ilk derecesi ve yükseğiyle
Following the
tümden ne yaptık?
July the 15th, the military
Zaman
courts
zaman
were
yanlış
abolished,
değerlendirmeleriyle
and
kamuoyunun
from
önüne
time to
çıkan
time
eski
they
bir
were making
Genelkurmay
wrong
Başkanı,
evaluations,
kendisini
and
gayet
a
iyi
former
tanırım, bu
chief of
düzenlemeyi bahane
staff,
ederek
whom I
meclisimizin
know
toptan
personally,
itham eden
wanted
bir
to
takım
use
açıklamalar
this
yapmıştır.
regulation as an excuse
Şimdi ben
and
özellikle kendi
accused
grubumuza
the whole
sesleniyorum.
assembly
Burada
overall. And I
parlamentonun
would like to make a
hukukunu
call
korumak
to our
üzere
own group
süratle
to
hepiniz dava açmalısınız.
protect the
Hepiniz dava
rule
açmalısınız.
of the assembly. You should be
Çünkü
taking it
anayasa
to
bunu
litigation and initiate a court case
Ve
against
meclisin
them, because the
yasama
Constitution mandates that
dışarıdan
the authority
atıp tutmak
of
suretiyle
legislation
yere
by
çalmaya
the assembly cannot be
maalesef bu
targeted
açıklamalara
through
CHP'den ve
slenders.
diğer
And
partilerden kimi
unfortunately,
milletvekilleri
some
desteklenmiştir. Daha
PMs
önce aksi
supported
kararı
the
aldılar.
statements
Bundan
of
yaklaşık 11
CHP,
yıl önce
even
tüm
though they
partilerin
made
desteğiyle
decisions
çıkartılan bir
showing
düzenlemenin
the
üzerine
otherwise.
FETÖ gölgesi
Following the
düşürülmeye
regulation
çalışılması, en
that
hafif tabiriyle
was put in
meclise
effect 11
saygısızlık.
years ago,
Daha da önemlisi, bu düzenlemeye destek veren tüm
and
milletvekilleri
not showing the
böyle bir
respect
ithama
to
maruz
it
bırakılması,
cannot be
yasama
accepted.
dokunulmazlığına ve milli iradenin temsilcilerine yönelik gayet bilinçli bir saldırıdır.
And this is
Vesayet döneminin hevesi
a
olan
conscious
bu
attack.
yaklaşımların
It's such
kendileri de
approaches
milletvekili
that
sıfatı taşıyanlar
are from
tarafından
the tutelage,
desteklenmesinin ise anlaşılabilir
coming from the
hiçbir tarafı
tutelage
yok.
times,
Ben
cannot
milletvekili
be
arkadaşlarıma
understood
bugün grup
anyhow.
toplantısında da
And
söylüyorum.
during the group
Parti
meeting,
sözcümüz
I
dün akşam
tell it
bunu
to
açıklamasında
our
söyledi
members,
ve
and our speaker
süratle
of the party
bu
said it last
parlamentonun
night.
hukukunu
This
hep beraber
the law of
korumamız
the
lazım
rules of this
ve
parliament
bu hukukun
need
gereği
to be
neyse
protected,
bunu da
and we
yapmamız
should do
Meclisi
whatever
ve
it
milletvekillerini
requires.
aşağılayarak sadece
Humiliating the
darbe ve
assembly
vesayet
and the
zihniyetine hizmet
parliament
edilebilir.
members can
Bu,
only serve to
göstermeye benzemez.
the mentality of the coup makers, the butchers.
Bir defa parlamentonun hukuku
The
oyuyla
law of the parliament
değerli kardeşlerim, emekli bir askerin peşine düşüp
cannot be
meclisi,
silenced.
milletvekillerini
Going
yasama
after a
dokunulmazlığını
retired
ilzama yeltenenler
soldier,
herhalde kendi geçmişlerinden utanıyorlar.
I believe,
Aksi
makes
takdirde böyle bir yanlışın
some
içine düşmezler.
embarrassed of their
CHP'nin
own
geçmişinde hiç
past.
şüphesiz utanacak çok
And
kişi,
in the past of
eylemi,
CHP, yes,
söylemi
there are
vardır.
many things
Ama
that they
müşteri
should be
olsunlar. Bu
ashamed of.
konu göğüslerini gere gere
But this is
savunabilecekleri
at
bir
least
meseledir.
something that they can defend clearly.
2009 yılında mecliste görev yapmış tüm arkadaşlarımız başta olmak üzere tüm milletvekillerimizin
All the
bu tür
parliament
ithamları
members
dile getirenlere karşı hemen dava açarak parlamentonun ve yasama dokunulmazlığının
should
onurunu
take it to the court,
savunacaklarına
and I believe they will protect the dignity and the honor of
Sözlerimi
our
bitirmeden
parliament.
önce
Distinguished
bir çağrıda
friends, before I
AK Parti olarak
conclude,
Elazığ
I would like to make a
ve
call.
Malatya'da meydana gelen
In
depremden
Elazığ
etkilenen
and
vatandaşlarımız
Malatya,
için
many citizens
kampanyası başladı.
were, of course, affected,
seferberlik
and
ruhu
we
içinde hareket
initiated
ederek
a
depremzede
relief
kardeşlerimizin
campaign,
yaralarını bir an önce
and it is
sarmamız
our duty to, of course, heal the wounds of all the victims
bir
of
çadırını
the
bile 2 gün
earthquake.
kaldım görmedim.
The other day he was saying he did not see a single tent by the Red Crescent. Well, you have eyes, but you can't see, and there is the sign of Red Crescent, but he does not see, and on the right side there is the sign of Afad, and he does not see it either. The relief campaign in our country will be supported by AK Parti in the strongest way, and Ziraat Participation Bank has now opened an account, and from our PMs, we expect at least 1,000 liras of aid, financial aid, until Friday. And of course, across the country, our organization branches have their own will to join that campaign, and if anyone interested, they can make their transactions, because the number of the heavily damaged buildings is about 10,000, and we will, with God's will, we will be reconstructing them, and all the destructed buildings will be reconstructed, and we will even construct the barns adjacent to those buildings.
Değerli kardeşlerim, tabii
my brothers and sisters, of course, they mistake us for some other people. We explained it many times before, but they have ears, but they can't hear. Sakarya, Kocaeli, Bolu, Düzce. We experienced all those earthquakes, but you know who were there on the field, and they could not complete the construction of those heavily damaged or destructed buildings, but we took office and we did so. And during the Van province earthquake, we rapidly removed all the rubbles, and we built new cities there. From the Silk Road to Dremit Erciş, we constructed sites from the scratch, and now there are houses overseeing the sea, the lake, and we were engaged in supra and infrastructure construction activities. The hospitals also, for example, Fethi Sek Hospital, with a capacity of around 1,000 beds, was capable of responding to all the presenting patients. And this goes the same for Malatya, a state that has the horizons to see. Will give the best answer to those who question why we have the city hospitals. This is the biggest, this is the greatest answer to give to them. And when I was at the Fethi Seki hospital, I was at peace, because I could see that the victims of the earthquake was being treated there. Some of them were being operated on downstairs in the operation theater. And of course, this was a great support to them. We, of course, have to take precautions. God forbid the worst, but we have to be taking our precautions.
Yakından takip ediyoruz.
And we, distinguished brothers and sisters, we will be closely following the situation and support our crafts people there. And our ministers are there. The Minister of Treasury and Economy and Urbanization, Environment, they're there. And they will explain what kind of incentives they will be able to give to our citizens. And they will personally explain to our citizens that they are not alone. And our Minister of Family and Social Labor, Family Affairs, will explain what kind of social security support can be given to our citizens, and hopefully we will overcome that predicament as fast as possible. As I conclude, I would like to wish for success for each and every one of you for your work throughout this week. I share my love and respect with all, and hopefully now I will be leaving departing for Delice, a place from which we garnered around 87% of the votes. I will be traveling there. Thank you.
Under this vision, Jerusalem will remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided capital.
Yüzyılın anlaşması. Ne anlaşması ya? Bu bir işgal projesidir.